The wind that night screamed like it was trying to warn me. Out past the dirt roads of Cedar Ridge, Oklahoma, the fields were bone dry and the sky lit up in flashes like God was cracking his knuckles. I stood on the front porch of the farmhouse barefoot, 7.5 months pregnant, one duffel bag at my feet, and a locked front door behind me. They told me I wasn't welcome anymore. My own family said I was dangerous, said I was twisting things, stealing from Dad's trust, sleeping with someone's husband, a shame to our name. One lie after another, served hot and fresh like the mac and cheese my mama used to make before church. This time, they didn't even give me dinner. Just accusations and an hour to disappear. No one asked if I was okay, no one asked if I had anywhere to go, and sure as hell, no one asked about the baby, or babies rather, because not even they knew I was carrying twins, or that the man they swore would leave me, the one they laughed at because he was just a tech nerd from New York, he stayed. They told me he wouldn't, but they were wrong. About everything. My name's Juliette Raine, and this isn't a story about forgiveness. It's about return. Not the kind where you show up to a family dinner with a smile and a soft heart, hoping for hugs and a warm welcome. I don't do that anymore. Not after what they did. This story? It's about revenge done right, the kind you plant in silence, water with work, and watch grow until it wraps around every lie they told and squeezes the life out of it. And maybe you're wondering how I got here. Kicked out? Pregnant, exiled from the family ranch I helped build, while my brother Bennett and sister Haley grinned like kids who'd finally won the prize. Well, let's rewind. The message from my father had been simple: dinner at 6, don't be late, family meeting, no smiley face, no love you, no bring cornbread, just curt and cold. It was early March, warm by Oklahoma standards, but the kind of warm that makes the air feel tired. I wore a denim jacket over a black dress that no longer zipped at the top. My belly was showing, but I hadn't told them yet. I wanted it to be my news, my joy, my timing. I parked outside the house I'd grown up in, white siding, cracked swing on the porch, rows of sunburnt grass lining the driveway, and immediately something felt off. No porch light, no sound from inside, no scent of fried chicken or green beans. Just stillness. Inside, the living room was silent except for the ticking of the old wall clock. My mom, Dad, Bennett, and Haley were already seated. Nobody stood, nobody smiled. I said, "Hey," like it was just a normal Sunday. Dad said, "You're late." I said, "Traffic," even though we both knew that was a lie. I was stalling. I could feel it in my bones. Something was about to break. I looked around for food. Nothing. No casserole, no sweet tea. Mom stared at her lap. Bennett leaned back like he was watching a good movie. Haley avoided eye contact, her jaw tight and pointed like she was holding back the punchline of a joke. "Sit down," Dad said. His voice was cold, final. I sat in the old chair by the fireplace, the one with the frayed armrest I used to curl up in with library books and lemonade. Then Bennett started, "You've been pulling money from Dad's land accounts. We have records." He dropped a folder on the coffee table like it was a bomb. I saw my name, misspelled, but circled in red ink like I'd committed a crime. "I didn't," I said. Haley jumped in. "And you've been sleeping with Dr. McNeil, the married guy, from Tulsa General. He told me you tried to come on to him." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the worst kind of lie. A rehearsed one. "You think I would steal from my own parents and hit on your friend's husband while I stopped myself. Too soon to say I was pregnant. Not like this. Mom spoke for the first time. "You've changed, Juliette." That hurt more than all of it, because I hadn't changed. They just stopped looking at me. "We talked about it," Dad said, clearing his throat like it was hard for him. "The trust's been updated. You're off it, effective immediately." "What does that mean?" I whispered. "It means you don't have a claim to anything anymore. Not the land, not the house, not the money." I froze. "You're cutting me out?" Haley stood up. "We packed your things already. It's in the hall closet. You have 1 hour." It was like I wasn't real anymore. just a story they were tired of explaining. I stood, knees shaking, and walked to the hallway. My duffel bag was there. One bag. For 24 years of life. No one moved to help. No one said goodbye. I opened the garage to head out. That's when I saw Dad, near the trash bin, throwing something away. I stepped closer. "What's that?" He looked up, barely startled. "Just some old photos. You won't need 'em." And just like that, my childhood photo album, hand-sewn, labeled, pages filled with summers, birthdays, science fairs, was gone. Tossed like trash. I didn't cry. Not yet. I got in my car, turned the ignition, and drove east. No destination. No plan. Just me, a duffel bag, and 2 heartbeats inside me that they would never get to know. When you've known people your whole life, you don't expect to walk into a trap. But that's exactly what I did. That Sunday wasn't supposed to be some defining moment. I'd worn a simple black dress with a denim jacket that couldn't hide my growing bump for much longer. I told myself I'd finally tell them about the twins. Maybe, just maybe, it would soften whatever weird tension had been brewing since December. The family dinner had been framed like tradition. No hints, no warning. But the moment I stepped into that living room, I knew. There was no pot roast in the oven, no biscuits rising, not even a whiff of Mom's weird cinnamon-laced sweet tea. Just 4 people already seated on the couch like they were waiting to conduct an execution. I should have turned around right then. Instead, I smiled. "Hey, y'all." Dad didn't get up. "You're late." "Traffic," I lied. There was no traffic in Cedar Ridge, just empty fields and one broken streetlight on County Road 12. Mom looked down at her hands like they were strangers. Bennett smirked like he was playing a part he'd practiced in the mirror. And Haley? Her jaw was tilted just enough to tell me this was her stage. Her moment. Dad gestured to the worn-out recliner near the fireplace. "Sit." I sat, stiff-backed, facing the firing squad. Bennett launched first. "We know about the withdrawals." He slid a folded bank statement across the coffee table like it was a warrant. I blinked. "What?" "From the land equity account, 4 different pulls, all tied to a routing number linked to you." I shook my head. "Number. That's not—" "Don't lie," Haley snapped, cutting me off like she was tired of even pretending I deserved air. Dad raised a hand, signaling her to calm down, but his face was unreadable. Not angry, not sad, just done. "Why would I steal from my own family?" I asked, voice breaking. Haley pounced. "You were jealous. You've always been jealous. Of Bennett, of me, of everything you didn't earn." I looked at her, dumbfounded. "Earn? I stayed here. I worked the books for the ranch. I ran the store accounts. I fixed every tax issue y'all ignored for years." "And you used that access to take from us," Bennett said coldly. I laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think I pulled money? Pregnant and broke? Really?" "You're not broke," Haley said with a smug smile. "You're sleeping with Dr. McNeil. You're probably planning to leave with him and play house in Tulsa." That one hit like a gut punch. "Wait, what?" Haley crossed her arms. "He told me you tried to seduce him. His wife saw your texts." I blinked. He's my OB. Those messages were about referrals. You think I would touch someone else's husband? "You've always been the drama," Haley said with mock pity. "Even when we were kids, always making a scene, always needing attention." I turned to Mom. "You know that's not true. Please, you know me." She wouldn't meet my eyes. "You've changed, Juliette. You just stopped looking." Dad cleared his throat again. "We've had enough. You're being removed from the family trust. The lawyer will finalize it this week." I felt like I was underwater, like every word was being said behind glass, muffled, distant. "What about the land?" I whispered. "You're out," Bennett said plainly. "Your name's gone." I looked at each of them, my blood, my history, my supposed future. "You're cutting me off because of hearsay? No proof? Just accusations?" "We've made our decision," Dad said. Haley rose like she was late for an audition. We packed a bag for you. It's in the hall closet. You have an hour. An hour. I walked past all of them, my brother with his smug jawline, my sister with her shiny hair and victory smirk, my mother who refused to raise her head. I walked through the hallway where family pictures used to hang. Only 3 remained now. In the last one, I'd been cropped out. I opened the closet. There it was, my duffel bag. Not even zipped properly. A few shirts, my worn jeans, an old toothbrush. They didn't pack my notebooks, my laptop, my framed photo of Grandma Lottie. They didn't pack my life, just what they thought I'd need to disappear. I left without a word. But on the way to my car, I noticed the trash bins were open. I peeked inside. There it was, my childhood album. Pages torn, photos folded, the one of me in my debate team jacket, tossed face down on top of a spaghetti box. I reached in, pulled it out. Dad caught me in the garage. "You won't need that," he said. "Guess not," I replied, tucking it under my arm anyway. I drove off into the Oklahoma night with nothing but a bag of half-packed clothes, a photo album that still smelled faintly of vanilla, and the sudden weight of truth in my belly. They thought they'd erased me. They didn't know they'd just released me. The motel was the kind of place you don't look at too long or too closely. The paint peeled in strips from the door, the carpet had a sticky give underfoot, and the bedspread, some hideous paisley pattern, looked like it hadn't been washed since Bush was president. But it was $28 a night and took cash with no questions. Motel room number 6 on the edge of Shawnee, Oklahoma. Just far enough from Cedar Ridge that no one would think to look. Just close enough that it still smelled like the red dirt fields I was born on. I sat on the edge of the bed, duffel bag beside me, phone dark, mind blank. For the first time in my life, I had nowhere to go. No backup plan, no couch to crash on, no one to call. Even Camden didn't know. We hadn't talked in 3 weeks. He was up in Denver working on some diagnostic software for a cancer institute. He'd told me he'd be back soon, but soon had started sounding a lot like never. And yet, I wasn't alone. That feeling hit me like a slow wave. My belly wasn't just full, it was alive. Something was moving, not a kick, not a flutter, more like a shift, a weight, a pull. I hadn't said it out loud until that moment. "I'm pregnant," I whispered into the ugly wallpaper. Then, after a beat, louder, "I'm pregnant." The walls didn't care, the ceiling didn't nod, but saying it made it real. And terrifying. I fished a test out of the convenience store bag I'd picked up 2 blocks away. The cashier hadn't said a word, just scanned it and slid it across the counter like shame was standard inventory. The bathroom light buzzed. I sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the test like it was a bomb. 2 lines. Bold. No room for doubt. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just stared in the mirror. I looked like hell. Dark circles, hair tied back with a rubber band, the faint outline of my past still clinging to my collarbones. But behind my eyes, something different glinted. Resolve. "You're not alone," I told my reflection. And then, softer, I whispered to the life inside me, "They don't get to define you. Or me." The motel room smelled like bleach and something vaguely burned. A busted AC unit rattled in the window like it was trying to escape the wall. Outside, someone argued with a vending machine. But in that moment, I was still. No chaos, just clarity. I slid my hand over my stomach. "Twins," I said quietly. I didn't know how I knew. I just did. I could feel 2 energies, 2 pulls, 2 possibilities growing inside me. A scientist might laugh at that, but I'd always trusted my instincts more than data. It wasn't just the idea of becoming a mother. It was the realization that I was about to build something new. And it would come from me, not from land passed down, not from trust funds or ranch legacies, not from family name or approval, just me. That night I didn't sleep much. Instead, I pulled out the only thing from the duffel bag that mattered, my old black leather notebook, the one no one in my family knew existed. I'd kept it hidden in the hollowed-out bottom of a thrift store chemistry book. It had survived college dorm rooms, late-night lab shifts, a breakup or 2, and now this. I flipped through the pages. Early sketches, biotech concepts, notes about cellular aging, an idea I once pitched at a university event that Bennett stole, word for word, and got an internship for. There it was in my own handwriting. Genetic predictive modeling for ovarian markers in undertested demographics. I traced the words with my finger like they were holy text. This was mine. And I had buried it for too long. I kept turning pages until I hit the one that still made me flinch. March 11th, junior year. Bennett asked for help with his pitch deck. Said he was lost. I basically built it from scratch. Today, he presented it like he'd invented the wheel. My name? Not mentioned once. Mom called him her little innovator. I sat there eating cold spaghetti, trying not to scream. I shut the notebook, heartbeat in my throat. They'd always erased me, quietly, subtly, with praise that passed me like a breeze. But I had let them. I'd swallowed it, smiled through it, played nice. Not anymore. Not with 2 babies depending on me. Not when the only thing I had left was the truth, and the brain they spent years pretending didn't exist. I pulled out a pen and flipped to the back of the notebook. In block letters I wrote, CRIMSONSTEMBIO. If they won't fund the future, I'll build it anyway. I circled it 3 times. It didn't matter that I had no investors, no laboratory, no office space, no mentors. I had something better. Rage, memory, and a science degree no one could steal. And soon enough, I'd have Camden. Whether or not he returned, I'd find my footing. But something told me he wasn't gone for good. The man I loved had his own way of showing up, quietly, steadily, when the world least expected it. That night I put my palm on my belly and whispered, "You're the only thing they can't take, and they'll never touch what we're about to build." The motel buzzed around me like a broken world. But inside me, the future hummed like a second heartbeat. 3 days passed in that motel like dog years. I'd set up a kind of routine, get up early, brush my teeth over a sink that gurgled like it was sick, make instant oatmeal with a plastic spoon, and open my notebook on the little folding table near the window. I kept the blinds cracked, just enough to remind myself the world was still spinning. At night, I'd lie still, my hands resting on my belly like I could calm the twins just by touch. They were growing fast. I could feel them stretching, claiming space in a world that hadn't even tried to welcome them. And every day I wrote scientific models, product sketches, budget mock-ups, branding concepts. I wasn't just daydreaming, I was building. Crimson Stem Bio had started as a name scribbled in defiance. Now it was turning into blueprints, a biotech company focused on early hormone detection in underserved communities, especially for conditions like PCOS, endometriosis, and early-stage ovarian cancer. The kind of care my mother never got, the kind of screening I never saw in Cedar Ridge. The science was real. The need was massive. I just needed one thing, someone who believed in me more than my family ever did. That someone walked through my motel door on the 4th night. Camden. I heard the knock while I was reviewing grant templates online. Soft, deliberate, not urgent, not frantic, just steady. I opened the door, and there he was. Same gray hoodie, same tired hazel eyes, a little scruffier than I remembered, like he hadn't slept well in weeks. He looked at me, not at my belly, not at the bags under my eyes, but right at me. "Hey," he said, voice low. I didn't move. Didn't speak. So he added, "I brought tacos." That broke me. I stepped aside, and he came in like he'd never left. He set the food on the table and looked around. The place was as depressing as ever, but he didn't comment. He didn't ask questions either. Just sat, pulled out a napkin, and handed me a cold soda. That's the thing about Camden. He doesn't try to fix. He just shows up and stays. I finally whispered, "I'm pregnant." He nodded. I figured. Twins. His eyes flicked to my belly, then back up. "Then we better hurry." "What?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded manila envelope. Inside, a cheap business card for a co-working space in Tulsa, a list of open grant applications, and a printed email from a contact he had at a Women in STEM accelerator. "You said you had an idea," he said. "I believe you." I stared at him. "Camden, you barely knew me when this started." "No," he replied. "I knew exactly who you were. It just took you a little longer." That night, we sat side by side on the motel bed, eating cold tacos and outlining the first 6 months of Crimson STEM's roadmap. Camden sketched budget forecasts on the back of napkins. I explained the science until my throat was raw. It was the first time in weeks that I felt alive. He didn't try to take over. He didn't ask for credit. He just handed me the pen and said, "Keep going." And so I did. The next morning, I moved into a tiny room at a co-working incubator in Tulsa. It had peeling paint, flickering lights, and one decent coffee maker. But it had Wi-Fi and whiteboards and people building futures instead of hoarding legacies. Camden rented a cheap studio across town. Nothing fancy. One mattress, one skillet, one toothbrush. But it was his, and for now, that was enough. I kept the pregnancy quiet. Not because I was ashamed, but because the world doesn't always make space for women who are building something and carrying something at the same time. I worked during the day and collapsed into Camden's arms at night. We didn't talk about love. We didn't define anything. We just built. My first grant application was rejected, then the second, and the third. But on the fourth one, I got a reply. A woman named Dr. Shay Rourke, founder of a small biomedical fund, sent me a single sentence. "Your clarity is unforgettable. Let's talk." I remember reading that email 10 times. It wasn't a check, it wasn't a lab, but it was a door, and after so many slammed in my face, it felt like air. We scheduled a call for the following Monday. I cleaned up my pitch deck, wore my only blazer, and presented from the corner of the co-working space with Camden off-camera, holding up cue cards like a proud stage dad. I didn't fumble. I didn't flinch. And when she asked what had inspired Crimson STEM, I didn't talk about betrayal or family or exile. I just said, "I built this because no one ever built it for me." There was a pause. Then she said, "I'll be in touch." The next day, I got the wire, $12,500. Not enough to build a company, but more than enough to start. I stood on the roof of that ugly building in downtown Tulsa, wind hitting my face, hand over my belly, and I whispered, "They were wrong, all of them, and this is where we begin." There's a special kind of silence that follows humiliation. Not the kind that's peaceful or earned, but the kind that lands heavy in your lungs, settles in your chest, and makes you want to crawl out of your own skin. I tasted that silence the day I pitched Crimson STEM Bio in front of a panel of men who smiled like they were doing me a favor just by showing up. The event was hosted in Tulsa, at a shiny downtown hub with glass walls, baristas on tap, and glossy signs screaming, "Innovation lives here." I'd been invited to pitch by an intern who saw my name on a small founders list and told me I'd be a refreshing voice. What he meant was, "We need one woman in the lineup, preferably one who doesn't scare us too much." I was 30 weeks pregnant, my blazer barely buttoned. I wore flat shoes because my feet were swollen, and I hadn't slept in 2 days because the twins like to have kickfests around 2 a.m. Still, I was ready. I'd rehearsed my pitch 100 times. I had my numbers memorized, my science airtight, my roadmap clear. Camden helped tweak the transitions. I'd even practiced how to stand. Shoulders back, chin steady, voice sharp but calm. When I walked into that room, I wasn't thinking about my family. I was thinking about the patients. Women in rural towns like the one I grew up in who didn't get screened early enough. Women like my mother, who spent years thinking cramps were normal until it was too late. Women who deserved better tools, earlier data, and systems built by someone who actually gave a damn. I gave my pitch without a stutter. The product was smart, a low-cost hormone-level detection strip that could flag warning signs of conditions like PCOS or ovarian cancer years earlier than traditional screenings. It was fast, scalable, and potentially life-saving. I closed with the line I'd written in the motel that first night, "If they won't fund the future, I'll build it anyway." The room was quiet. Then came the smile. It belonged to a man with slick gray hair, cufflinks shaped like dollar signs, and a laminated advisor badge clipped neatly to his blazer. He leaned forward just enough to be condescending. "Impressive," he said, "but we've already had our fill of single pregnant founders trying to prove a point." There was a ripple of polite laughter. Not loud, just enough. No one stopped him. No one stepped in. I stood there, all heat and silence. I nodded once too tightly and walked out. Outside, the spring sun was blinding, but my lungs burned like I'd just sprinted miles. I didn't cry. Not yet. I made it as far as the corner deli before the nausea hit. Bent over a trash can, I threw up so hard I felt my ribs shift. A woman in a stiff blouse muttered behind me, "Girls like that shouldn't breed." She didn't say it to me. She didn't have to. That night, I sat on the floor of Camden's apartment with a bowl of mac and cheese and didn't say a word. He didn't push. He just handed me a spoon and quietly turned off his phone. Later, as I folded away the pitch materials and closed my laptop, I said, "I'm done trying to convince rooms that were never built for me." Camden looked at me, thoughtful. "Then maybe we stop asking for a seat." I raised an eyebrow. "And do what?" "Build our own damn table." The next morning, I filed the official LLC documents for Crimson Stem Bio. I stopped applying to pitch competitions and started reaching out to labs, women-led clinics, and crowdfunding platforms instead. If the doors wouldn't open, I'd knock on different ones. And as for that panel? I didn't forget. I wrote each name down in the back of my notebook, not out of spite, but for record-keeping. Memory matters. Camden and I grew closer, but it wasn't all simple. That weekend, as we lay on his mattress with my head resting on his chest, he said something that stiffened my spine. "My mom knows your aunt." I pulled back. "What?" "She mentioned Regina at brunch a few months ago. Apparently they went to college together. They still talk sometimes." I sat up, heart pounding. "Did you tell her about me?" "No." "You sure?" "Yes, but, Juliette, I should have said something sooner." I didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. Just breathed. "You want to be with me, Camden?" He sat up, nodded. "Of course." "Then no secrets, no side doors to my past. You're either in with both feet, or you're not in at all." He didn't argue. He just pulled out his phone and deleted every contact tied to that world, right in front of me. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was finally mine. I didn't do it all at once, and I wish I could say I woke up, flipped a switch, and deleted my entire family like clearing out spam mail, but it was slower, more deliberate, like peeling a scar open to clean the infection underneath. The first one I deleted was Haley. Her Instagram popped up in my notifications one night. Another sponsored post, another event, another fake smile beside a fake quote about uplifting women in science. She was wearing a blazer I'd once lent her. I remember because the pocket was still stitched shut. She'd never opened it. She captioned it, "Empowered women empower women." I laughed out loud. Then I opened my contacts, found her name, Haley Sloan, and hit delete. The second was Bennett. His last message was still unread. "Hope you figure yourself out. Ranch is thriving without you." Delete. Mom and Dad took a little longer. Not because I still had hope, but because their names were tied to things like home and emergency contact. I had to untangle them from everything. Phone settings, medical forms, social media, even my Uber account. But I did it. One by one, I removed every trace of them from my digital world, not out of hatred, not to punish, but to finally breathe without their shadows weighing down my lungs. Camden didn't say much during those days. He just brought me coffee in the mornings, made sure I ate between work sprints, and kissed my temple when I looked like I might cave. He didn't try to fix me, he just gave me room. I stopped checking their profiles, logged out of every account that linked me back to Cedar Ridge, even filed a name alias on my research applications, J. Raine instead of Juliette Sloan. I wasn't hiding. I was rebirthing, and I had work to do. With the seed money from Dr. Rourke, I secured a small bench space at a private research lab in Tulsa. It wasn't fancy: shared counters, ancient centrifuges, a fridge that moaned like a ghost, but it had what I needed: freedom and access. I designed my first prototype, a saliva-based hormone sensor. Cheap, discreet, portable. Something any woman could use at home, in private, without having to beg a doctor to believe her pain. I called it Echo, because every woman I'd ever met had a story that echoed mine in some way. Dismissed, misdiagnosed, ignored. Echo would change that. Camden helped build the back-end analytics dashboard. He was quiet about it, almost shy, like he didn't want credit, but I gave it anyway. On the project brief, I listed his name right next to mine. Camden Thorne, systems architect, partner. We weren't married. We hadn't even said, "I love you," but he was building with me. And in my world, that meant more than any ring. The closer we got to launching the beta prototype, the louder the past tried to crawl back. One evening, I got a call from a blocked number. I didn't answer, but a voicemail followed. It was my mother's voice. Dry, detached, almost robotic. "Haley's expecting now. We don't need more drama. If you're alive somewhere, stay gone." No apology, no explanation, just a casual dagger through the chest. I saved the voicemail, not to hurt myself, not even for legal reasons, just proof. So that years from now, if I ever doubted my decision to walk away, I could hit play and remember. They were never going to choose me. That night, I stood on the fire escape outside Camden's apartment, watching the lights of Tulsa flicker in the early dusk. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who memorized recipes to make Mom smile, who let Bennett take credit for her work, who bought Haley's lies just to keep the peace. She was dead now, and something sharper had taken her place. I opened my laptop and finalized the trademark paperwork for Crimson Stem Bio. It was official, not just an idea, not just a napkin sketch, a business, a brand, a force. The next morning, I picked up a rental car and drove 3 hours out of the city to meet a clinic director in Bartlesville, a woman named Dr. Lauren Patel, who ran a network of rural women's health outposts across the state. She was skeptical at first. "You've got no investors, no corporate backing, and you're what, 34 weeks pregnant?" I nodded. "Yes, ma'am." She narrowed her eyes. "And you think a strip test's gonna save lives?" I didn't flinch. "Not by itself, but it's a start. It's a tool. One I didn't have, one my mom didn't have, one your patients could use before they ever get referred out." She stared at me for a long beat. Then she smiled. "Damn. All right. Let's talk logistics." On the drive back, the sun dipped low, painting the highway in gold. The twins kicked in rhythm, as if they knew something big had just shifted. I turned the volume up on the radio and let the wind rush through the window. This was mine now, my name, my company, my direction, and I was just getting started. The courthouse in Tulsa didn't look like justice. It looked like paperwork and slow elevators and vending machines that swallowed your quarters. But that morning, as I stepped through its doors in my navy blazer and low-heeled boots, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: control. Camden walked beside me, silent, respectful, just a presence, not a shield. I didn't need a savior. I needed a witness. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with hushed voices and the shuffle of suits. The judge, a sharp woman in her late 40s with natural coils pulled into a tight bun, sat tall and ready. At the plaintiff's table, I laid out a neatly organized folder: grant letters, lab records, time-stamped emails, draft versions of my thesis, and notes from my college advisors, all with my name, all predating anything Haley had touched. My lawyer, Renee Tisdale, mid-50s, steel-eyed, with a calm rage she wore like pearls, stood beside me. "We're not just alleging plagiarism," Renee began. "We are bringing forward a case of intellectual property theft, fraudulent funding practices, and misuse of federal grant resources, all orchestrated by Haley Sloan using scientific work authored exclusively by my client, Juliette Raine." The room went still, and then the doors opened. Haley walked in wearing cream, of course, a sheath dress tailored to perfection, designer heels. Oversized sunglasses like this was a red carpet, not a courtroom. She glanced at Camden, her jaw tightening when she realized where he was sitting, 2 rows behind me, arms crossed, eyes unblinking. She hadn't expected him to stay. Her legal team, 4 men in matching suits and performative concern, offered the usual defense: sibling rivalry, miscommunication, unfortunate overlap in ideas. They even tried to say Haley's version of the work was a natural progression from conversations she and I once had as teenagers. Then I stood. "I'd like to submit additional evidence," I said, handing a small USB to the clerk. The judge tilted her head. "What is this, Miss Raine?" "Audio recordings," I replied. "Conversations held outside my old bedroom, captured on accident, but they're clear." The clerk pressed play. My mother's voice came first. Cold, calculated. "She's not controllable, that's why we cut her off. She always wanted her own name." Then Haley, laughing. "It's not stealing if she never knew how to use it." I didn't flinch, didn't cry. The judge leaned forward, her eyes hard. "I am granting a preliminary injunction," she said. "Effective immediately. Miss Haley Sloan is prohibited from representing or benefiting from any material related to Crimson Stem Bio or the plaintiff's intellectual work." No cheering, no clapping, just the sound of silence folding in on itself. And in a courtroom, silence is justice at full volume. As the hearing ended, I gathered my files without looking at Haley. But I saw her. Alone. No family by her side. My parents hadn't even shown up. Her face wasn't angry. It was empty, like someone who finally realized the applause wasn't for her. Outside, reporters waited with microphones like bayonets. One stepped forward, fast. "Juliette, is there anything you'd like to say to your family?" I paused, let the tension stretch like a drawn bowstring. Then I smiled, barely, and said, "No. I already did. In court." Later that night, back at the lab, the twins were asleep in their matching blankets on the old couch I kept in the corner. The overhead lights were low, and the space smelled faintly of ethanol and printer ink. I checked on them, gently tucking Leona's tiny foot back under her blanket, then sat at my workstation. My inbox pinged. Subject line: "Hope you're proud. Haley's gone. We're alone now." No name. But I knew who it was from. My father. I didn't reply. I didn't even let myself feel anything. I just slid on a pair of gloves and went back to work, pipetting a protein compound I'd been testing for months. Something new. Something real. My mother died before she ever got a fair diagnosis. The silence between us had turned into years. So now, I worked in her name, not to honor what she was, but what she never got to be. Powerful. Free. Heard. As dawn broke through the lab windows, I whispered to the room, to myself, to the daughters I was raising, "We're okay now, all 3 of us." The courthouse in Tulsa didn't look like justice. It looked like paperwork and slow elevators and vending machines that swallowed your quarters. But that morning, as I stepped through its doors in my navy blazer and low-heeled boots, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Control. Camden walked beside me, silent, respectful, just a presence, not a shield. I didn't need a savior. I needed a witness. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with hushed voices and the shuffle of suits. The judge, a sharp woman in her late 40s with natural coils pulled into a tight bun, sat tall and ready. At the plaintiff's table, I laid out a neatly organized folder: grant letters, lab records, time-stamped emails, draft versions of my thesis, and notes from my college advisors. All with my name. All predating anything Haley had touched. My lawyer, Renee Tisdale, mid-50s, steel-eyed with a calm rage she wore like pearls, stood beside me. "We're not just alleging plagiarism," Renee began. "We are bringing forward a case of intellectual property theft, fraudulent funding practices, and misuse of federal grant resources, all orchestrated by Haley Sloan using scientific work authored exclusively by my client, Juliette Raine." The room went still, and then the doors opened. Haley walked in wearing cream, of course, a sheath dress tailored to perfection, designer heels. Oversized sunglasses like this was a red carpet, not a courtroom. The soil was dry but workable. Camden handed me the small citrus saplings, one lemon, one orange, and the twins took turns patting the dirt around the roots. Leo wore a cowboy hat 3 sizes too big. Leona had a shovel she mostly used as a drumstick. Our backyard in Stillwater wasn't big, a narrow strip of earth boxed in by stucco walls and a sun-faded fence, but it was ours. The twins giggled as they stomped the ground, helping. Camden strung up a tiny wooden swing under the pergola beam, whistling as he worked. I pressed my hand to the top of each tree, feeling the weight of something finally taking root. This was what they couldn't take from me. Not with lies, not with erasure. The doorbell rang. A plain brown package sat on the front stoop. No return address. I opened it carefully. Inside, wrapped in cardboard, was a single photograph. My throat caught. It was the photo, the one from my 10th birthday, the one where I'd been cropped out years ago. Only this time, I was there. Off-center, awkward smile, wearing the hand-sewn blue dress Grandma had made me. I flipped it over. This is the version that matters. See? Our Aunt Regina, the one person who'd never said much, but apparently never forgot. I stood there in the doorway, stunned. Camden walked up beside me, saw the picture, and just said, "She kept it." I nodded, didn't need to say thank you. He already knew. That afternoon, after the twins went down for their nap, we sat under the pergola sipping lemonade. Real lemonade, tart and messy, and not from any powdered mix. We didn't talk much. That's the kind of silence you earn. Not the silence of exile, the silence of enough. Camden looked over eventually. "You okay now?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the trees, the small grove we were starting, the way the swing moved slightly in the breeze. I glanced down at my hands, lined, stained faintly from the lab, stronger than ever. Then I said, "I'm not just okay. I'm exactly who I was meant to be." Camden rested his fingers over mine, not gripping, just anchoring, like he always did when words weren't needed. The twins burst out the door minutes later chasing a butterfly, their laughter rising like music. And I sat back in my chair, breathing deep, full. I didn't fight to be remembered. I built something too real to ignore.